On this episode of Doing the Most, what the heck is this? It's a piece of equipment you might not need, but you might be able to put to great use. You know, our channel has a reputation for leaning into more of the intermediate and advanced brewing topics, and we're not bashful about that. We have a lot of fun here on the channel, but what we really like to do is encourage folks to level up their brewing game. And that's where this beast comes in. This is a powder filling machine, and it takes ingredients like yeast or tannin or nutrients, and it weighs, portions, and allows you to package those ingredients in smaller quantities. And you're probably thinking, why would I ever want to do that? Well, once you start leveling up your brewing, a lot of times you will start buying ingredients like your favorite yeast in bulk. And then you have to figure out how to store it. Bulk yeast generally comes in 500 gram pouches, which is about a pound if we're talking freedom units. And you don't want to just keep it in a mason jar like this with a bunch of air on top. Now, I do that with my bread yeast because I don't really care about my bread yeast as long as it gives bread lift. But when I'm pitching my yeast into something that's like a big, expensive melomel, I want to make sure that yeast is viable. So buying your favorite yeasts in bulk will save you money over time if you can properly store it, and that's where a machine like this comes in super handy. This is next level brewing. So take, for example, this yeast I recently bought. It was about $35 for 500 grams of yeast. Compare that to my local homebrew shop where I'm paying about $1.25 these days for good wine yeast. And those savings really start to add up, making an investment in a weighing and sorting machine like this viable because of just how much money you're going to save if you're brewing a lot and if you're buying in bulk. So how does the thing work and how well does it work? Well, your powder, whatever that is, tannin or fermento or yeast, goes into the hopper. Beneath your hopper, there's an apparatus that's on springs and it vibrates. And what that does is it shakes just really small amounts of whatever your powder is, yeast or tannin, into the next hopper, which weighs it. Once it's hit the weight that you've chosen, on this convenient little LCD screen, it will then be ready to portion out of the chute over here. And it's got a little light sensor where you can press your container or your bag up under it. It senses that there's a container there and then will dispense and proceed to measure out the next round of powder. Super handy if it works well, right? So this one was sent to me by Vevor to review. Big shout out to Vevor. They have a coupon code for you if you'd like to pick one of these up or really anything else off of their site. And of course, it helps to support the channel. This one is their lowest end model, and this one I felt like was the right one to review because it's the one that you are most likely to purchase if you jump on their website looking for a powder filling machine like this. So I really put this thing through its paces. The first thing you've got to do when you open it up is remove these very long bolts from the bottom of it. I guess they're there as like a safety mechanism to stabilize the contraption that's inside there. And once you've done that, it's ready to go. So I filled it up with just a little bit of yeast, maybe 200 grams of yeast, and I started trying to weigh out 5 gram increments. And for the first little bit, it was pretty accurate. And then it got really inaccurate. Like I was getting 2 grams or 7 grams or 34 grams instead of the 5 grams I was trying to get out of it. And so that was a little bit frustrating. So I did a little tinkering. I added the entire brick of yeast to it, and then I upped my weight to 10 grams. And at that point, it started to get really accurate. Now, there are some speed settings on here, slow, medium, and fast. And I found that the fast setting seemed to work the best, at least for powdered yeast. The medium and slow settings seemed to weigh out too much yeast. So once I had this thing filled up with yeast, once I had it on the fast setting, and when I had it set for 10 grams, I started getting pretty consistent measurements. However, they were always pretty consistently 0.8 grams higher than what I was trying to weigh out. So if I had it set on 10 grams, I was generally getting around 10.8 grams. Not a big issue, I guess, except if, say, you run a homebrew shop and you were selling yeast. For every 10 packets of yeast that you would weigh out at 10 grams, you were losing 1 packet of yeast that you could sell. So for every $30 worth of resale yeast you're weighing out, you would be losing $3, which over time would really add up. Now at the home brewing scale, I don't know that that's necessarily that important. When I'm using bulk yeast like this, if I've got it in like a big bag or something where I've got 200 grams of yeast and I'm gonna scatter it over 3, 4, 10 batches over the course of a month or so, I'm not really worried about pitch rate. And obviously I'm not really worried about storage either. But generally with this, we're talking about vacuum sealing and long-term refrigerated storage. So I can forgive a little bit of overage on weighing out, but if you were going to use something like this in a commercial setting, you might really want to dial in those weights, maybe set it for 9 grams in hopes that you get 10 grams, such as that. Always great to double check tools like this with a scale. As far as ease of use, it's stupid simple. You dump the thing in the hopper, you set your settings on this very simple screen here, and then you just kind of get into an assembly line of shake, weigh, pour, seal, shake, weigh, pour, seal, and so on. I think that for the price on this thing, it's a pretty good investment if you're buying a lot of bulk stuff and you don't have help in weighing and packaging, because it's kind of like your helper to portion everything out for you so you can just focus on the packaging part. It does take up a lot of space. It is super heavy. And I don't know if you can tell, but it's got a real resonance to it. And so I think it's also made out of pretty thin metal. If you look on the inside, there is also some pretty cheap welding that I don't love. Now, I don't think that you're gonna be tumbling this thing around. And so like cheap burnt little spot welds are not really the type of thing that I want to see on something that I am investing into as a long-term piece of equipment. Overall though, I'm fairly happy with it. I think it's a cool little piece of kit. It will live in my garage and I will bring it out from time to time, like when I make big bulk yeast purchases, or I've got, a few bags of Sparkaloid over there that I have yet to open. And since Sparkaloid is being discontinued, I probably need to portion and package those out in a way that's going to preserve them for long-term storage because, I love my Sparkaloid. Overall, I think it is a worthy buy. As far as the form and function of it, it's kind of big, it's kind of clunky, it weighs out a little too much yeast, and it doesn't really deal well with really, really small weights of stuff. So I'd give it like a 3 out of 5 stars. I think you might want to look at one of their upgraded options if you were going to invest one of these yourself, and I'll put some links in the description to some of the other options there that you can use the coupon code for. Is this the type of thing that I would recommend to beginner brewers? No. I would not, because you are probably not buying bulk ingredients just yet. But for those of you out there who have been brewing for 3, 5, 10 years, and you are focused on high quality home brewing, I think something like this that allows you to kind of mechanize the process a little bit better would be a worthwhile investment if you've got the place to store it and if you're willing to give grace for a little overage every now and then on your weights. I have a feeling that most people watching this video have never considered getting one of these for their homebrew setup, but I am delighted to be able to expose you to the wonderful world of mechanized weighing and portioning. And if you've ever used one of these in homebrewing or at a homebrew shop, let me know what your experience is like. Have you used the Vevor model? Have you used a different model? Let me know in the comments. I'm always curious to see your experience in the homebrew world and learn from you just as much as y'all learn from me. Until next time, happy brewing and cheers.
Homemade brews and various how-tos, everything from mead to roast, bake creation, fermentation, inebriation, doing the most.